Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Scyushi and this is going to be a beginner's guide or an everything you need to know about Elden Ring Nightreign. This is going to end up being beta footage, so some stuff might change, but generally speaking, I think this video will age well just because a lot of the mechanics that are in the game currently probably aren't going to end up changing. So from the hub area, we can end up opening up the map and we can see there's expeditions, characters, relic sites, and visual codex and the sparring ground. So going through these in order, the expedition is going to end up being the primary mode of play. Essentially, we are starting a hunt similar to Monster Hunter, where this is going to end up being the main boss at the end of the 3-day cycle, which we'll get into all of that. Before we do, we should talk about character selection, because the characters in this game all have distinct different abilities. Keep in mind, each of the characters themselves are going to end up having not only their own weapon setup, but their levels as well, which is something that we'll get into when we dive into the raw gameplay. There's going to be the Wylder, which is going to end up being kind of your warrior character with a passive ability to cheat death a single time, a claw shot, which will end up pulling foes towards you, and the ultimate ability Onslaught Stake, a powerful single attack that launches an iron stake with a great explosion. If we head on over to the sparring grounds, we can kind of experiment with all of this stuff. The crazy thing is this sparring ground is really intuitive. Like, we can actually change our character level to do like full DPS checks. So if we hold triangle or Y on Xbox and then press L2, it's going to end up doing this grappling claw. But then our ultimate ability, the charged onslaught, is going to end up being this, which shoots a gigantic stake of death. And it also does have a charged version as well. A really nice combo you can do is grapple an enemy in and then hit them with your explosive. So the next character, the Guardian, this guy is basically your tank. So he's got the ability to block at the cost of his stamina slowly draining, but no enemies will be able to break your block so long as you're in that stance. You've got a whirlwind ability and then your ultimate ability, which is really, really cool. So let me show you these. To do the block, you just block, move the joystick in any direction while you're walking, and then just press circle or your dodge button. And now we're in that stance. So our stamina would normally just constantly be draining, but we would be able to tank a lot of hits. Our whirlwind ability, which is going to end up being our basic ability, is going to be really good for not only crowds, but little mobs will get knocked up into the air. It's really good for staggering. And then our ultimate ability, which I still think is like the coolest thing ever, will end up targeting whatever enemy you're focusing on. And if we do the hold variant of it, it's going to end up raising a protective area. I did mess that up though. You do have to keep holding the button because the point is this is going to make everyone in the area super defensive and tanky, but we can't move while we're doing it. Next is the Duchess. So she's got attack and dodge optimally. So the quick dodge basically. And the character skill restage, and then your ultimate ability is going to end up making yourself and your allies invisible. So here's our quick step, which we can just dodge almost repeatedly. It's pretty insane how quickly you can dodge. Here's our restage ability, which again, I can't really showcase to you guys. There we go. So we see that we're actually causing a phantom version of what we just did to deal even more damage. So he's going to continually take more damage as if basically it's an echo effect to the damage. And then our ultimate ability makes us invisible, which means that us and our teammates can get a backstab. And lastly, we have our spellcaster. Our active ability makes it so that we basically steal affinities from enemies and conduct some sort of a magic cocktail, it says. We'll check that out in a minute. And then the ultimate ability is an forbidden blood chant to brand nearby foes with blood sigils, basically a debuff. Okay, so I got this guy active just so that we can mess around with our ability here. Basically, our first ability, as I end up attacking this enemy, if I end up using my first ability, it will suck the mana out of him. As we're building up this magic cocktail with 3 different types of spells. So let me just tag him a couple times, get the spell up to 3 times on him. And then if we cast it for the last time, it's going to end up having a special effect based on the elemental magic types that attacked him. So you can see right now, because I was using all of this same magic spell, it's going to end up doing these random blade attacks every now and then. Pretty cool, albeit it's a very complex class. If we use our ultimate ability, it's going to end up doing a blood rite on the enemy, which obviously causes damage, but makes it so so that for whatever damage we end up doing towards him while he has that blood right, it's going to end up giving us some life steal. Okay, now for the sake of the beta, we only have this one expedition, so let's check it out. In the full game, you would be able to set up a password so that you could play with your specific friends, but I'm just going to end up playing with randoms, and the matchmaking is not great, but I do like how quick and easy it is to play with randoms. I appreciate that. All right, so going into a round, I'd say it's good to select a character that the others aren't using. I've already got a lot of experience with the Guardian, so I'm just gonna take him because it seems like they've taken the other classes. It doesn't mean that there isn't hero stacking, and that's like something you shouldn't do. It's just, for my money, I think that it's good to iron out the full kit. So now we're in the expedition and we're on day 1. So depending on the expedition, I assume is going to be where our spawn points are. So every time that I've selected this expedition, I've always spawned in the same spot. Sites of Grace are going to end up having this big yellow glow to them, and all you gotta do is get near them and you'll get all your flasks back. This is also gonna be where you'll level up. And because you're playing a specific class, it means that leveling up is as simple as having the experience points that you need to level it up, and it'll just give you all of the XP points appropriately. So let's head over into this camp right here and start trying to grind up some XP. There is going to end up being these boxes that we can find. This is random loot, so these guys could potentially end up stealing it, but that's okay. That's why you gotta be a little bit cautious with the items that you grab, because you don't necessarily wanna steal something that fits better with somebody else's kit. So we've killed enough enemies that I can get at least a single level, and I'd recommend leveling up as often as possible because it's going to help with the exploration side of things. Now, if we open up the map, you can see there's all sorts of different locations that we could mark and go to, right? Now, each of these areas is going to kind of be differently scaled. So one area might be really, really strong enemies and intends for you to come back to it later. Doesn't mean that you can't skillfully still win if you're really, really good at the game, but yeah, it's something where you kind of gotta consider which area you're going to first so that you can end up grinding for gear and what have you, because as you end up killing world bosses and clearing random camps, you're also going to end up unlocking more and more like special passive abilities that will end up helping you out with not only just raw damage, but it might be a defensive stat or something that ends up making your roll deal damage, stuff like that. As far as the basic movement of the character, it's very, very nice because you can sprint really, really fast, as you can see, and you'll only drain stamina when you're sprinting in battle, but then otherwise you just double jump while you're on a ledge and your character will end up kind of doing a wall jump. Oh, and if you see any of these big glowing spots, it means that you can launch up into the air. Really fun, really cool. Also, these random trees that are all over the place, these are going to end up being helpful to the whole squad. So this is going to be a spectral hawk that allows us to glide around the map. Don't forget, this is still Elden Ring, so you can at any point swap to like two-handing a weapon or just dual wielding and whatever else. There's a lot of different random little points of interest that can end up being very, very invaluable. Like churches will almost always end up being where you can end up increasing your flask charges. There's also passive items that you can see, and I would recommend picking up most of them. You don't have to pick up all of them. Like smithing stones and stuff like that are really useful for when you end up finding a merchant, because he'll allow you to upgrade your current gear. Sometimes you can find weapons and gear off of random mobs as well. The other thing to consider is that most of the gear that we end up finding is actually random generated, so they might end up having like some select very specific passives that can end up being really, really good for our given situation. And I would recommend using your ultimate abilities as much as you want, just because unless you're going for a boss or something, there's not really any reason to save your ult, because you're going to have plenty of recharged ults throughout a round, and they can end up being really, really invaluable, not only to yourself, but also to your team. So now that this great enemy is felled, we get like a special perk. But you can see there's Beastman Curved Sword, Wakizashi Sword. It shows the various passives that it has. So this is like improved fire attack and so on and so forth, or I could go for FP raised. Now, the passives are very, very important because they will end up giving various abilities that you might not normally have like on your base weapon. So I would recommend that you want to steadily upgrade your gear throughout your play session, either by upgrading it with a smithing stone, random event, or just grabbing your hands on better gear overall, because eventually the gear that you have is basically just not going to be adequate enough. So by completing that random event, we just got passive stat increase. And on the map, you can also see like this area is going to end up giving you a fire weapon and so on and so forth. It's pretty intuitive with, oh, you can go to this specific area to get this specific item. You do want to be careful as you come into these dungeons as well, because maybe you don't have enough time to clear the actual boss and get the goodies out of it. So in this case, I just left because the fog is slowly rolling in. Like we can see it's starting to get a lot more active and fast. So what we're gonna do is you can see on the compass right here that there is actually an Erd tree, right? So I'm going to mark that for the rest of the homies here, and we're just gonna head on over. All right, so now that we're at the location that the fog was pushing us to, we're going to have a little bit of a challenge with some normal enemies before we end up fighting the day 1 boss. And now that we've beaten a primary boss, we get to choose some random passive, which is going to affect us for the rest of the game. Or should I say the rest of the round. And now after a short time, the fog is going to roll back, and we're going to end up having day 2, which allows us to explore more areas and try and get as many levels as possible before day 3, which is going to end up being the big final boss. So now we're at the end of day 2. So we got a few level ups, we got a bunch of power ups and whatever else, and now we're fighting the day 2 boss. And this will be a prime example to show you guys, if you ever end up downed or seeing a teammate die, you basically just have to hit them a couple times in order to end up reviving them. All right. So we were able to just barely beat him, so I don't think we'll be able to handle the tier 3 boss. But now what basically happens is this portal is going to end up opening up and taking us to the day 3 final area of this round. And when we get to day 3, we actually get a couple different options here. There's going to end up being a shop, so we can purchase a couple various items. You can find these shop NPCs out in the world and they'll sell you various pieces of gear and stuff. So it can be really, really helpful to track one down rather than getting a few levels. Or this, which allows us to strengthen our armament, but you can see that it requires specific smithing stones, and I didn't find any on my last run. So all I can really afford is an additional level and maybe like one of these physics. In any case, this place is beautiful, breathtaking even. And now we're going to fight the day 3 boss. Oh, and our other guy, I guess, disconnected right at the very end. Well, we're gonna lose. Honestly, that's one of my biggest complaints with games like this. They expect you to be committed to the entire round, and it takes like 40 minutes or something like that. I mean, it can be a little bit less time if you're fast enough, but still, the point is that's a lot of time for everything to go right. And unfortunately, this guy's kind of the worst example that they could have given us for a boss in this game, because he's one of those typical FromSoft bosses where he dances around the arena and you can barely touch him. And the only way that you can get good and fight him over and over again is you basically gotta go through the entire round all over again. And when we're done with the round, we'll end up getting various currencies based on how well we did and what have you, and then we'll go to the Relic of Rights. So each of the different characters is going to end up having a different color combination of relics that they can end up equip. The warrior is red, red, blue. This guy's red, red, yellow, so on and so forth, right? And as far as I know, the relics that you unlock are completely random, but they will give you various passive effects. So you can kind of just swap to them anytime that you want while you're in the hub area. And this is kind of how you'll make a build. Kind of, I say, just because it's a little bit weird. But at any time you can end up selling your excess relics for a little bit more of the currency. You can even set up a preset loadout with these bad boys too. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know what the main currency is for right now because I don't think that we have access to it in the beta. I would assume it's going to end up, I don't know, being some sort of a skill tree. Maybe we use it to unlock more expeditions, or maybe there's going to end up being a shop in the full game. But either way, that's going to do it for today's video, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I know that this is beta footage, so it's kind of weird to have a video like this so many months before the game's full release. But I honestly don't think that the game loop is going to change that much from now into launch. So hopefully this video remains relevant. In any case, I would appreciate if you would like the video, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. You know how it all goes. All the different YouTube buttons, just press all of them. I still have a couple videos planned for Nightreign, but if I'm being honest, I don't know if I'm going to get this game day 1. Like, it was a lot of fun, but it's also really weird.